Let's now talk to Stephen Kinnock, Labour MP, member of the Brexit Select Committee as well, and Labour MP for Aberafan. Good morning to you, Stephen.
Morning, Julia.
Good
Hello.
morning. So how are you going to vote tonight?
Well, I'll be voting against the deal. I think its fundamental weakness is the political declaration on the future relationship, which is just so vague and open-ended, and it just can't be right that we vote through something which is basically a leap of faith when it's such an important relationship we have with the EU. So I'll be voting against it, and I'm working very hard with this cross-party group that we're calling Norway Plus, to try to get the Prime Minister and indeed the leader of my own party to see that a Norway-based Brexit would be the best, most viable, pragmatic and bridge-building option for the future of our country.
Now, a Norway-based Brexit, of course, being one which still allows free movement.
Well, Articles 112 and 113 of the EEA agreement give really clear safeguards that you can pull the emergency brake. You then have to agree a long-term solution with the EU. They can potentially retaliate, but the fact is that it's there in the treaty. The EEA agreement has existed since 1993. It's well established and well understood. We can just take it off the shelf and plug into it. So I think we've got to get through this now. We can't have more of this infighting and narrow tribalism. There's not a Brexit that is perfect for everybody. It's time to find a compromise, to rediscover the lost art of compromise in British politics.
Well, this is a compromise between what Leavers want would make sense to me. But what I don't understand, and the Prime Minister in her speech in Stoke-on-Trent yesterday talked about this was a compromise because there was this narrow vote. Now, 55-45 for the Scottish independence referendum. It wasn't a compromise. Scotland didn't become a bit independent. It didn't become independent. It stayed in the United Kingdom. 52-48, and now we're told there needs to be a compromise. But no one talked about a compromise option before the Brexit referendum. No one indeed talked about it in the immediate aftermath. And indeed, even to 2017, people weren't talking about that. It's only recently, all of the different challenges, whether it was going through the court, Supreme Court, and then the vote in the Commons, and whether we trigger Article 50 and going through all of these machinations, it's only now that people are talking about the need to compromise between Leave and Remain. There isn't a compromise between Leave and Remain.
I think the big challenge the Leave side has had is that it wasn't clear what Leave meant. I'll tell you who said
Wasn't
this.
It?
2 months before the referendum, Mr. Nigel Farage went on Question Time and said, look at Norway and Switzerland. They're rich, happy, self-governing countries. Would that really be so bad? Daniel Hannan, prominent Leave campaigner, been saying from the start we should take a Swiss option. Owen Paterson said you'd be mad to leave the single market. So I think when you take everybody that voted Remain and a big chunk of Leavers who actually saw staying very, very close to the single market and the customs union as a way of leave the political institutions, but stay very close to the market, you've got a pretty substantial majority there. And so I think that's the fundamental problem that the government has had and others is when it said Leave on the ballot paper, what did that actually mean? And when you take 52-48, for me, that's a mandate to move house but stay in the same neighbourhood.
Well, and again, I don't remember anyone saying before that vote, including you and anyone on the Remain side, that if it was close, well, then it didn't really count. I mean, it's either there needs to be a threshold that needs to be passed, or there doesn't.
We lost. I mean, the Remain side lost.
But when are you going to get to grips with that?
Well, I am. I mean, I genuinely believe.
But you think that my side should compromise?
Well, your side does include a very substantial number of people who are advocating a Norway-based Brexit before the referendum. Just look at Farage.
No, Farage didn't advocate that. What he said was in response to, well, what about Norway? But Norway would be terrible. He goes, well, no, actually, it wouldn't be so terrible. That's a different point from him saying that's what we should go for. But the point is, there's a range of views on Leave, and there are lots of different reasons why people would have voted Leave. A Tory vote for Leave or a Labour vote for Leave may be saying very different things. But likewise, you could say the same for Remain. And you could say that, Remain and Reform, as if that was ever an option. The reality is that in any election, as someone who votes for the Labour Party, we can see the range of views in the Labour Party right now, all the way from, Tony Blair, all the way through to Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell. A massive range of views, and voting Labour for different reasons, wanting different things. But that doesn't mean that we say, oh, well, in that case, we didn't know what you voted for, we won't enact it. Do you understand why a lot of Leave voters listening listening to this and watching what goes on the TV and watching what goes on in Parliament are very frustrated and very angry and feel that their vote, they were told it mattered, they were told in a leaflet they paid for all their own taxes, it would be implemented. Everyone said they would accept the outcome, the referendum, and now they're going to see their chances of getting Brexit scuppered. Do you understand why people feel angry and disillusioned?
Yeah, and that's why I'm not backing a second referendum. I think that we've got to... Look, I believe in parliamentary democracy. We live in a representative parliamentary democracy. We had a referendum which was giving the people the opportunity to give us the instructions. It's our job then as parliamentarians to interpret that instruction. You've just made the argument very well indeed that there were 17.4 million people voting leave, and probably almost as many different reasons for voting leave. Labour leavers, Tory leavers, some very concerned about the European Court of Justice, some about free movement of labour. Everybody had their reasons. It's our job as parliamentarians to put all that into the mix and to come up with an interpretation of what the 52-48 mandate actually means. And for me, that is to move house but stay in the same neighbourhood, stay close but come out of the political institutions, out of ever closer union, and make it very clear that the EU can also reinvent itself, that we could be part of an outer ring of countries with a voice, with influence, but we're not part of that gravitational pull of European integration. I think that's the right solution.
We're not going to see any reform of the EU. Any movement of the EU now has been towards further integration and not less integration. Just finally, briefly, Stephen Kinnock, what do you believe is going to happen next in the next few days, weeks and months?
Well, I really hope that the Prime Minister will finally show some leadership and will say, OK, I've lost this vote. I've got to find a parliamentary majority. The only thing that matters now is to get a parliamentary majority for a solution that will be rapidly and easily acceptable to the European Union. I genuinely hope she will pivot to this common market 2.0 that we are proposing, which I think can command a parliamentary majority. I hope the leader of my own party will also finally put some flesh on the bones of our position. And I think if both sides were to whip for this, we would have a clear parliamentary majority and we'd have an opportunity then to start reuniting our deeply divided country.
OK, Stephen Kinnock, thank you very much indeed. Labour MP, member of the Brexit Select Committee. He's going to be voting against the Prime Minister's deal tonight.